All right, welcome everybody. This is the fifth Mandel working group call. It's March 9th, and let's have a look at the agenda, and we can talk about if there's anything else to add. I'll share my screen. On the agenda, I've got some more clarity to follow up on the Mandel cold strategy, some updates on testing on Jungle. We can get a check-in on the survey and the work we're doing on assembling contact information for all the exchanges and dApps. Maybe revisit, this is something that came up in a previous call that we decided to park, was whether we needed to set up a Mandel development channel in Telegram or elsewhere. At the time we said was maybe not yet necessary, but I think maybe time to check back in. And we can check in on how things are going on Kylan as well. All right, let's get into it. I'll start with this one here. I saw this question from Matthew in the chat, which I think is related to this. Matthew was asking, you just want to clarify, make sure I understand what is in Mandel 3.1 from what I heard. It's based on Mandel 3.0 RC1. We're going to be merging in the B1 2.0 latest stuff. We'll be porting the diffuse from 2.1 and transaction lifecycle features, 4 of them for the API plus blue paper.
Rotation should also include the state history.
Sorry, which one?
The rotation, the box load rotation.
Okay.
Should also include the state history logs.
Also includes state history logs.
I just copy pasted in the Mandel Upgrade Launch Group channel in Telegram the scope of that with links included. If you want to verify, and that comes from Stan actually, so it should be good.
Deprecated features and modules.
Yeah, I posted that as well. So it's GitHub issue 7597.
Beauty.
It's essentially just really 3 things. Yeah, 3 big things. The blocks log or state history logs, and then the diffuse DeepMind logger, and then the deprecated features. And I just to add, I haven't gotten confirmation, so I retract my statement of last week. There was confirmation, that confirmation was pulled back. And so I no longer have confirmation that is what is being worked on. So I'm still waiting on an update on that.
Okay, so is there any impact to our timelines that we discussed so far, or I'll assume we're on the same pace?
At this point, too early to tell. Likely no impact, but uncertain as to whether or not the work is continuing. So I believe Stephen is on the call. I think the last time the Mandel repo was touched by the Fractally team was 14 days ago today. So until I get an update, I can't answer. I don't know.
Stephen, are you able to provide an update?
I have not been assigned to work on it at the moment.
Okay.
So I'm waiting for updates from higher up.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. So we'll keep following up and we'll check back in next week. Anything else to add on this topic? All right, moving on.
Well, Ted is on the call. Ted, can you comment on that question just asked?
Which question? On the question that Eve commented on already? Is that what you're asking me to comment on?
What they just asked Stephen about in terms of the plan for work on Mandel from your team.
I think we're wondering the status. There is a portion of work that Dan's team, the Fractally team, has been assigned that we're currently not sure what the status on whether or not they're working on it.
I know the exact status. Eve knows. So I stand by Eve's statement.
So yeah, we need an update from the Fractally team on that, on whether or not they're committing to do the 3.1 release. Is that right?
If I'm muted, correct. Yes.
Okay, maybe actually.
And if that is not the case, so essentially we're just trying to find out sooner rather than later, because if it is not the case, then we will have to assign different resources to it. To the best of my knowledge, that won't change the timeline, because the timeline for the transaction life cycles is still the end of June. And so I don't see how that would change it, but I don't know until those new resources join and until we would need to know if we need to assign to them this particular file. So it's too early to tell at this point. So basically waiting.
Okay. I've added a comment with that update there.
And thank you, Kevin. Kevin has been doing work in the repo. Thank you very much. That's one thing that maybe would be worth adding. I'm not sure where, but in the communication strategy, maybe Daniel, I'd like to add an item about maybe just say communicate Mandel repo, and I'll know what I want to say.
Communicate Mandel repo. What do you mean by that?
Without
part of the developer resources package kind of?
No, maybe put it in to do. and just
Okay.
add an item that I can touch upon whenever we have time in the agenda. Unless I explain it, then we're going to go
Okay.
into it right now.
Okay.
It's not the time.
Remind me what you wanted me to write.
Just say communicate Mandel repo, and I'll know, and then when I'll explain, then you'll be able to reword.
Okay. It's there up here.
Maybe you mean by that, and if not, fine, whatever. But like, I wasn't sure of the procedures on Mandel repo. For instance, I have approval on a couple of pull requests, but I'm not sure. Does that mean then I should hit the merge, or someone else will do that?
You have
I'll wait. When we get to that item, I'll explain. There's nothing wrong. There's an opportunity, and I just want to. So let's wait for that item, and then I'll explain it, and maybe it addresses what you're saying.
Fair enough.
But it's not because somebody did something. It has nothing to do with that. It's nothing bad.
Beauty. Okay, moving along. Test Mandel. The only update I have to hear is we've got a couple more BPs have joined and have been put into producing spots. So we got Aloha and Us Nation are now also producing on Jungle. I don't think we ever came up with what the threshold, how many BPs we want to be running before we're ready to start the test. But I think we wanted more than this. So we'll keep working on getting more BPs to register.
Stan, would you be able to participate? I note that Amsterdam isn't in the list. You're on the call.
Yeah, sure.
All right. I'll add you to the list here.
Who else?
Anyone else on the call here that might
potentially,
be able to participate on Jungle?
Kevin
Okay,
Hefner can run a private node from home.
cool. Go ahead. Was that you, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm not sure about running a private node at home. Maybe.
No
I
worries.
think you know how to run nodes. I'm guessing you know how.
Yeah, I'm not sure like if we're serious, I'm not sure what like the throughput would be. I'm limited on my ISP on like data transfers. So
just don't run a public node and you'll be fine.
Yeah. But no, I was just joking. But yeah, if we can get more people, that would be good. And I'm just scanning the chat here. I don't know who else. That's fine. We can keep looking.
Yeah.
7 would be okay, because then 7 people run 3 nodes each. It's kind of standard in the test nets.
Yeah, I'm sure we can make do. We'll give Stan a chance to reg produce and check in on how we're doing next week. Maybe we'll have a few others also.
And I think Costa Rica mentioned they were trying, but they were having issues. So that would potentially be another 8th one. I don't know if it's in your list, or was that on
It's
Kylie?
not. I don't have them on the list, but I can put them
Was
with
it
a
in,
question mark.
I think it was in Jungle. He mentioned that. It was Javier.
I think it had to do like the jungle monitor has to be manually registered. It's a little different sometimes. So I think they were regged as a VP, but maybe it wasn't seeing their API. And then of course, I think they had some problems with their server crash. But
Yeah, one of our servers is having a bad day. So anyways, maybe tentative, you want to put Javier as well.
Cool.
So Costa Rica.
yeah, I
Got
think
'em.
they should be good.
Or yeah, I'm not sure which name they'll go.
Right. I don't have anything. I don't know if Stan, you had a chance to look through the survey questions from 1.8. If there's any feedback you've got at this point.
No, not.
Cool. No
I
worries.
didn't.
Cool. That's also the somewhat related to this is the stuff you're working on. Any updates on the dev resources you're assembling? So I guess this would include the documentation, any progress on documentation stuff.
Sorry, who was that question directed to?
For Stan?
No, as I wrote, I was completely out for like
Okay.
3 weeks. So
No problem.
I need
No
to.
problem. No worries. Got an update from Randall. Is he on the call? Randall, do you want to talk about the progress you made? I saw you shared that you're making some progress, your team. Did you want to talk to that? If you're not able to speak, I can speak for you. I see you're cannot talk. Okay, yeah, thank you, Randall. So Randall and the EOS support team have been working on creating a database of exchanges and dApps, and so far they've collected 291 email addresses of the 363 that we've identified that we want to target. So making good progress there. Any updates, Ted, on the Docker image documentation?
The gentleman that has volunteered to do that was in the hospital and now has shingles and struggling with a bit of a health concern. And so he's asked for a little more time, but he has committed to doing that.
Okay. Do you need a couple more weeks, maybe at least? Next week will probably be too soon to check in. Let's try in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
And then that's the Mandel development channel. Wanted to talk about that. It was brought up, I think, on one of the first calls, and we agreed as a group that for now, the Mandel working group channel we got is going to work fine. As we get, I think, the development, we're getting more teams on board and things like that. I'm not sure. Is it time to revisit? Do we want a special development channel for Mandel? Do we need one? Does one exist that I don't know about? Or are we happy to continue coordinating in the Mandel upgrade channel?
Typically, when we have releases like this, the proprietary channel like that is good. It's temporary. And then everything goes back to the main EOSIO dev channel, which I don't think we should fork out of because it's got so many people in there.
Right.
I mean, it's a really good user base. That's where people go for support in general. So I would not see the need to create a new channel or to change other than, again, like what we're doing right now. It's a particular release or particular function. Then we just spin that off. That way there's less clutter. And I would say that it should be open to anybody. So anybody who wants to join should be able to come into that channel. And maybe when we start,
and by
doing
that
more
channel, you mean
communication,
the
we would
existing, the Mandel working group
one.
channel that we are already using. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So we can continue coordinating there. If it gets out of hand, then we can fork off if we need to.
We're going to need to put a bot stopper at some point if it becomes too much, but that's like any other. And we also leverage the Jungle channel, the Kylie channel, the main developer channel, the BP main chat channel.
Yeah. There's quite a bit we can do there. Okay, so and how about I'm going to just consider this. We're going to close this, and we agreed it's not necessary. Done. I'm coordinating with the Lao Mao to reactivate the faucet. Don't have any status progress to report other than that. I think that was it besides the new item now, that the Communicate Mandel repo. Do you want to cover that, Yves?
Yes. One of the metrics that is often used from people outside of EOS, so just people in general looking at any blockchain, they go and look at the main repo to see how much activity there is over a period of time. And one of the issues that we've had with the main repo that was under block 1 was that a lot of the development was being done in sub branches or was being done in private repos. And so from the outside world looking in, whenever they were doing marketing material or whenever they're Messari reports or whatever it is, it always showed for the last, after the mainnet launch, we see a decline in PRs. We see a decline in essentially development from their point of view, development of EOS. And it would be great, or there's an opportunity for anything that we do going forward. Everything will be open. Obviously, nothing should be private. We should be figuring out how we can leverage the Mandel repo or whatever repo it becomes so that everybody's contributing to it. So that for the outside world that doesn't know all these sub branches and whatever, they just go to one place and they can see, oh, great, a lot of green. EOS is being worked on. Whereas right now they see, if you look at the block 1 repo, block 1 has not touched it, I think, since July 10th or something like that. And that was just one bleep. And before that was mid-May. It would be great to have one location where we see a lot of commits, where we see everybody's working in that one repo. And why I was mentioning Kevin was just because, when we look at the Mandel repo, we can see when the last time somebody touched it. It would be great if that becomes the norm. Everybody contributes to that one. Whatever it is, any work that comes out of the blue papers or ongoing, basically it's all in the same repo in a way that's organized that for somebody who doesn't know what we're doing and all the subgroups and the sub branches and everything, they can easily see all the development that's still being done by EOS. So the story would be EOS stopped developing publicly and now it goes back up. I don't know how we want to coordinate that, what we need to do, if that is a thing, if there's anything to do, but our competitors definitely capitalize on that and make sure that data is accessible publicly without needing to jump through hoops to get it. Right? Because typically it's CoinDesk or Cointelegraph or whoever, they'll just go to the main branch and just look at how much green there is.
Yeah, so the goal, if I understand right, is to communicate the strategy broadly that, hey, we want people all collaborating here. Stop collaborating in your silos, bring your work to this common repo. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah. So that again, for the externals, they won't know all of the hundreds of different repos that we're working in. If everybody contributed to the same repo somehow, they would still own their work, that it's still theirs, it's still linked to them. But there's that common point where the externals just go to one location to find out all the work that's being done in EOS, whereas we don't have that right now. And so from the outside world, it does look like there's no development on EOS.
So the real objective is to bring to the surface all the work that's happening in one place for everyone, whether it's in one Mandel repo. That's one option to be able to meet that objective.
I'll share in the group and maybe you want to pull it up on screen or whatever, but it's pretty obvious when you look at it just from a visual point of view. And the idea is to be able to get back what we had before, which is a lot of contributions. Like you can see it died off. That's maybe not the best one. Let me find another one. Like this one is pretty obvious. And if you go back to 2018, then that's when you see significant change because it counts everybody who's contributed. So the second one I just put, you can see, hey, look, EOS was being developed. And then look, EOS is no longer being worked on. So it would be great that we now have a repo where everybody works in again.
And you mentioned that it's common that, I guess, crypto aggregators or people who are trying to assess the health of a crypto project are using this as evidence on the health of a crypto project kind of thing.
For sure, yes. Because they likely don't go embed themselves in the community to ask, hey, what are the 150 repos you're working in? They go to the main EOS branch and then they look at the main contracts.
And they're like, oh, nothing's being done on EOS.
Nothing's being done.
They can't see all the working groups that's going on and all that stuff is hidden.
If you look at this, then it also reinforces the idea that was the repo that people were working in, right? Because there are a lot of contributions. And so it reinforces that the repo that they're looking at is a valid repo, right? So it's a terrible narrative and you can't blame them.
So they're
not in any blockchain. They're Cambridge Analytica, they're whatever, they're Messari reports, they're whatever.
So our repo should ideally be the inverse of this. We were flat and now we're growing. Did anyone have thoughts on how we might accomplish that?
Yeah, so that is mainly due to just the way GitHub reports and then Block One's branching strategy that they used. So the way their idea was they wanted the main landing page in GitHub, the master branch, or now they call main, right? The main branch, when you land, to be the last release or the most recently released version of the software. And those graphs would update when we would switch over the current main branch to that given release. So it would show like nothing until release day, and then it would like all retroactively, and then it would set idle until the next release day. Now, when those releases were far apart, depending on when you look, nothing happened, which is true. Absolutely nothing happened on the main branch until they did a release. So the way to play the game, quote unquote, is to simply just make the main branch, the landing page branch, which doesn't have to be main, rename it to developer. You can change that setting in GitHub, although I think you're better off just going with the defaults. Otherwise, you have other issues with GitHub. But just make the main branch be, quote unquote, your development branch where everything is happening, and then do release branches for when you do a release. And then you won't have this issue. Then the only thing you need to do is on the README on the main page, just make sure that it's clear that, hey, this is the development branch. You probably don't want this version. You want to go here to get the download releases.
I see Ted nodding his head in agreement. Did I capture that? So we want to make the main branch, the development branch, and then make a release branch when you do releases.
Yes.
And that's something that anyone who's working on the Mandel code base needs to be factored in, or is that something that the ENF has to change in the way that the GitHub repo is set up?
Mandel GitHub repo is already set up that way.
Okay.
And I guess to be clear, what I would like is that whatever it is we do here, just like what Kevin mentioned, the way that it's done, we would then communicate that to everybody else that's working in EOS, for example, on the blue papers. So that ideally, whatever it is coming out of the blue papers, they work in the Mandel repo to do that. So that everything that's being done for EOS is in one location. It's still linked to a bunch of other locations, but that way EOS as a whole is capturing, or the repo as a whole is capturing the work that's being done in the ecosystem.
So it's beyond updates
beyond
to
just
EOSIO.
Mandel.
It's any
yes and no, because all of the work that would be done arguably the work that would be done in the blue papers relates to EOSIO.
Yeah, so that's I don't expect we'll be doing our Pomelo stuff in the Mandel repo, for example. That's EOS work. So where with blue papers, it makes sense. But maybe we need,
But just whatever it is we communicate, the way that Kevin just mentioned it, that we replicate that elsewhere. So that we have a formal, like, this is how it's done. This is how we're doing it. This is why we're doing it. We'll just copy paste that whenever people will be doing work for the group.
The other thing that you can consider doing is like merging back in CDT and like example contracts into the main repo as well. that gets you additional traffic there. And you go back to more of a mono repo.
So merging, sorry, say that again. Merging, what was the?
So what we did at block one was, right, we ripped out all the various components. What used to be EOS was broken up into many different repos. We created a contracts repo, and then we even went one step further than that recently, where we broke out each individual contract into its own repo. And so that goes against what you're trying to do here. So, you could bring the contract example, quote unquote, example contracts back into the main repo. You could bring CDT back into the main repo. You could bring EOSJS back into the main repo, right? And so you could basically merge all the various EOS repos into the Mandel repo. And then that gives you, of course, then a lot more activity in that particular repo.
There was at one point before I left block one, an initiative Dan had started to go back to the mono repo, and we had started funding to get a person to work on it. Greg Lee and Todd Fleming were starting to look at it, and then that's when they made a kind of big shift. Dan stopped focusing on it, and Greg Lee was moved over to B2B sales and stuff like that, and the initiative died. But that concept was something that Dan realized to become a bit unwieldy and had started to ask for a mono repo after Dan had started like full-time coding again and started working on rodeos and stuff like that. But it died out. It's a big effort to do that, to get it all working and compiling correctly.
Yeah. And
when you say it's a big effort, is it in terms of human resources and time? Like multiple people over a lengthy period of time, or is it one person for a month?
More than a month. And we were getting to the point where we felt we would need, and Stephen, we should hear what Stephen has to say, but where Greg and I felt we should hire a full-on build master so that the person was able to merge it all back into a mono repo, but was able to make the whole repo be able to build and all the dependencies stay in alignment and everything. Because what Dan was finding as he returned back to coding was very hard to set a developer environment up and have all of these different repos coordinate correctly.
This big effort would be specifically for this, if we were to try to merge the CDT, EOSJS, and example contract back, whereas this on its own would be a minimal effort, I'm guessing?
Yes. And I think Dan was probably going further than just the 4 items you list there. I think going to take it a little farther than that to go back to the mono repo.
So you would call that initiative mono repo?
It's because they're split across. Each one of those things is a repo. And so you're moving them out of their separate repos, EOSJS, EOS.cdt, et cetera. And you're just making them subdirectories in one big repo. And then you're trying to build that whole repo and everything. And so that's where it's called a mono repo versus multiple repos, a single repo.
Anybody listening in? That might be something that you want to write 1,000 to 3,000 words on, submit to the Blue Paper feedback strategy with a budget, a proposal.
Yeah, I guess, do we have an action item here besides, hey, community, you know that this is something we want, so raise your hand if this is something you want to help us.
Kevin or Stephen, do you guys want to talk more about the pros and cons of it? Kevin or Stephen, a proponent of going back to a mono repo, or do you see a lot of pros about staying as separate repos?
So the main disadvantage is that Git is just not really designed to handle mono repos, because Git's model is you have to get everything. The mono repo works better with a version control system where you can pull subdirectories at will.
What about the fact that it used to be the case that even for pieces that were not dependent, block one, for whatever reason, probably because of Brendan, wanted to make a big release splash each time. So they would hold back stuff that could be released independently and wait for the big release. So that might have made it where in the block one way of doing things, a mono repo wasn't as painful because you had the one big splash release every 6-9 months, whatever. In the new world, we're saying we'll release things that are unrelated when they're ready. Would that have any impact on it, Stephen? Or
Possibly. When mono repo was discussed internally for what Dan was talking about there, speak for Dan a little bit here, which probably shouldn't, but normally when we talk about the mono repo, it wasn't so much bringing CDT and EOSJS back in, and EOSJS into the repo is a little weird probably, but CDT used to be part of the main repo as well as the example contracts. But when we talk about the mono repo, we're strictly talking about, at least recently, all the submodule repos like FC and Chainbase and AppBase and all of those. The mono repo was mainly about bringing those back in because they're a pain in the butt with like submodules in GitHub or in Git is just are a real pain, particularly when you start trying to support multiple releases. Like I often, if I have a change that affects FC along with EOSIO, there's times when I have to create as many as a dozen pull requests to get one small change in, because there are multiple versions of FC, a submodule that you have to have a pull request into, and then you have to then update that submodule in all of the various EOS branches. And so it just blooms out into this like mess of things. So, I want to make this small little change in FC, and it's just not worth it if I can live with what's currently there, because it really is just a pain in the butt to do all that. Where a mono repo, you would simply have to do that. It cuts that in half in terms of you only have to do it in each of the release branches, not once in FC and then once in EOS. And would help you if you've got an AppBase and Chainbase and an FC change that you have to do. You wind up doing 30 PRs just to get some change in. Once you start supporting multiple releases across multiple submodules, it becomes a real nightmare.
I think it's what Kevin has made a really important point. It's the submodules like Chainbase and FC or whatever, not things like EOSJS, which is JavaScript and nothing to do with C compiling and dependencies and libraries and stuff like that. So the mono repo would be more of those submodules and not things like EOSJS, or possibly not even that. That might be a consideration. If those have been split out, I think that's what Dan bumped into when he started trying to compile latest versions, and he was getting wrong versions of submodules in with the larger thing he was compiling.
AppBase, FC, Chainbase, EOS VM.
AppBase FC, is that all?
Two separate.
FC?
Yeah.
/FC. Yeah.
And
Chainbase and EOS VM.
And and Abios and Ubism and SoftFloat and RocksDB.
etc. Can you post those in the Mandel group?
Yeah. And I'm probably butchering the spelling of all these things too. So, maybe someone else can post the list and I'll paste it in there.
Yeah,
or I'll save this as an issue, and this is a public repo, so anyone can add it.
So generally, the idea would still be that when somebody from an external that's doing a report on how much the chains are being developed, at least now, even if we went with the mono repo sub modules mainly, not EOSJS, not CDT, for example, they would still come into EOS and still only see 3 things. It's easy to click on 3 things. It's really difficult to click on 140 things. They would still be able to add those 3 numbers or 4 numbers. It's much easier, and that would mirror what other people are doing. Does anybody see, I'm not saying that we will necessarily do that, but is anybody vehemently opposed to this idea if we started exploring that from the ENF's point of view?
Maybe we point the user out to activity reports. If we just need to show the activity on GitHub,
these people aren't coming to us. That's what I'm saying. These people aren't reaching out and asking information. These people are typing in EOS GitHub. They go to the link they see and they just click. They never talk to you. You never even know they were working on a
repo. In README, just the first few lines in README of the central repository, just put a few links.
Sure. Yeah. Repo make their job much easier as well. Like, I'm not saying not do it, but and I guess, Stan, the question was more so, would you be opposed to if we started exploring this idea?
I would say developers code maintenance, I think, is primary priority, right? If we can reduce the number of submodules and make life of code management easier, we should do that. If we just need to display activity, we have ways to do that. We can just publish links on README. We can place the links for pointing to development activity and the actual development branches. So we can just guide the user where to look for activity if you want to see the activity.
Will it be in the same organization, just different repos? Is that right? You can also pin repos too.
So one thing about desubmoduling, if we do it, we have to do it all at once. Block one made the mistake of trying to do it incrementally and only applied it to some branches, and that made it 10 times worse.
Yeah, it was a nightmare because we did it and then undid it. And so merging across those branches it was basically you had to remove your entire directory structure and start over every time you had to switch. It was a complete nightmare. But Stan, I'd be interested in your opinion on, like, for instance, you use Chainbase, I believe, or AppBase, or
AppBase as well. Yeah, both.
Yeah.
FC as well.
Having it in a mono repo complicates your ability to some degree.
Because I mean, there are libraries. I'm using them as libraries.
Right, exactly.
If you would belong to one repo instead of three, that would be the same work for me. But if they belong to Mandel as a whole EOSIO software, that makes it a bit complicated. But it's also doable. I mean, it's also possible. There would be just subfolder in EOSIO repository, which I would have as a submodel. That works too. I would say, we need to analyze all pros and cons for maybe,
Is there plans to move like Chronicle into?
I never thought of this. It's possible. It's possible to have, because it is integrated in with EOSIO, and also it depends on state history version, right? If state history format changes, I need to update Chronicle. So it is linked quite tightly. So it could be also a sub-project on that needs thinking. I think we just need to have maybe a few proposals on organizing the code.
Sure.
Yeah, there are definitely pros and cons here. It's not all on one side. And in the end of the day, you may decide that the effort's not worth the difference, because you just switch one pro for one con in a lot of cases. But
right. Okay. How do we want to move forward? Eve, you mentioned that the ENF might investigate this further. Is that right? Do you guys have?
We have a blue paper feedback process going on right now. There's 1,000 EOS, 2,000 EOS on the line for things that may have been omitted in blue papers. This could be a way for somebody. There's already incentives on the line for somebody to make a little proposal and say what the pros and cons are, what the potential budget would be, what would be needed to make this happen.
Need a call to action then to the community to, hey, here's something we're looking for feedback on.
And it's not necessarily that we would do it, but again, like Kevin just mentioned, there's pros and cons of both. But then if we had the information, we'd be able to make the decision.
This is worth about $4,000 if someone writes a proposal that gets approved into the blue paper. It's 2,000 EOS to do this. Stan, if you wrote one and Kevin, you wrote one, even if they disagreed, but they were both viable options, you could both make $4,000 to just hammer out 1,000-word proposal on how this could be done.
Nobody's using the web form. If you can't read instructions, it's very difficult to justify $4,000.
These three new guys that are joining, all new guys, maybe just assign a task to the code structure and propose a repository structure.
Until April 11th and April 18th, assuming they all start when they said they were going to. What might be nice, if you would be willing, is we form a very small subgroup of maybe Stan, Kevin, Stephen, if you would be willing, plus those three gentlemen, and we do a quick investigation or something. I think missing Brian Johnson as well would be very helpful if we could get a few of you to be willing to do that. But they can't work on anything for us until April 11th and April 18th. So two will join on the 11th and one on the 18th.
That is okay. I mean, it's not urgent, right? Refactoring the whole structure is a long work. Basically, analyze. You need to write a proposal, analyze all pros and cons, and then actually do the move. It's 6 months ahead of to actually finalize. So if they're coming in a month, it's fine. Just they're fresh, and they will assignments. This is
there's more work. There's more work than people. This is not a problem, Stan. This is not a problem. We've got way more files that are being requested of them than people that we have to be assigned to those files. So I'm not saying that necessarily this is what they'd be working on at all. That's why I'm making a call out to the community who's listening to this, that this might be something that somebody might be passionate about, that they may have feedback that they'd like to provide. There's currently a incentivized process for obtaining that feedback for something that wasn't captured in the blue papers that I think would be an opportunity worth capturing, potentially, depending on, again, on the pros and cons. And
$4,000, not just for submitting, it has to be accepted. How does
accepted? You'll get $200. You'll get 100 EOS just for submitting, as long as you followed the guidelines for submitting. After that, if you get accepted, it's $4,000. It's 2,000 EOS.
2,000 EOS.
So it'll be more than 4,000. So I would believe that Kevin or Stan could knock this thing out in at least, at most 4 hours. That's $500 an hour. If it, and I think theirs would probably get approved. Even if we don't implement it, just we accept it as it's a good alternative or good additional proposal. Doesn't have to ever get paid for or implemented.
Doesn't have to be accepted as being implemented. Has to be accepted as this is valuable for the blue papers.
This was valuable feedback. Correct. It was valuable feedback that was not formally put in the blue papers. Now, it may be something that was thought of from the original authors, but they decided, because obviously the blue papers, what is the final product? There's hundreds of pages behind that. It may be that the teams decided, they're only putting their top 7 or whatever things, and they left that one out. But then that's external feedback from a third party that say, actually, we think this should go in. And then the authors, again, go back and say, now we've got somebody else that thinks this should go in. So there's a process with the original authors as well. But essentially, if it's accepted in the community enhanced version of the blue papers, then yeah, you get your bounty.
Sounds like a good opportunity. There was mention. So you were mentioning some names there for a sub. Do we want to talk about a subgroup, or is it too early for that?
I think it's too early for now, in my opinion.
I'll leave that off for now, and then we'll see what comes out of the blue paper feedback, and then if we need a subgroup, we go from there. Okay. Anything else to add on that topic? I will
maybe rename. Maybe call it Mono Repo Initiative.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Mono Repo Initiative or something like that.
Repo for Mandel. How's that? And I'll get this cleaned up after the call. Maybe someone can help me with the list of stuff I'm missing.
In the main chat, in the Mandel chat, a few people posted.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'll have a look at that after. Okay. Anything else? Those were the items on the agenda. Are there any other items anyone wanted to discuss while we're here? Great. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you again in a week, and I'll put out the summary and the video when it's ready.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Daniel.
Right.
Thank you.